So, welcome once again to the virtual world and to a global digital conference by CII, the Logistics Summit, virtual logistics summit, digital logistics summit. COVID-19, I think this half year, uh, every single person on this globe would have heard, spoken, thought about this word, I think, every single day. That is COVID-19, Corona, and whatever different names people are calling. And that's the um, what do you call flavor of the time right now, COVID, if you put it on the lighter side. Uh, and that is driving this particular conference, that is COVID-19 challenges and opportunities for Indian logistics sector. This session three, which we will be talking about digitization and role of technology in logistics sector. Uh, I feel quite privileged to chair this session and have a great panelist together. And the panelists range from the service provider to the technology supplier to the recipient of the logistics and some logisticians, the practitioner logisticians. Um, and we are going to talk about mainly the how this digitization, this COVID could speed up this digitization. Digitization was bound to happen one day or the other, but uh, maybe COVID-19 is going to uh, become a catalyst and speed it up. Uh, so I'll not talk much about this today, and I will let the panelists speak. So before we go on to the session, I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists today. Um, to start with, from the manufacturing side, we have Mr. Tapaswi from Henkel, Henkel India. He leads the logistics for this German adhesive manufacturing Henkel in India. He's into logistics and planning management for over 2 decades, has been involved in designing, developing, setting up distribution networks for many companies like Bacardi, Hindustan Coca-Cola, Ultratech Cement. So from commodities to FMCG, and right now he takes care of logistics for Henkel. And he'll be talking later uh, about the challenges he had faced. Uh, Further, we have Mr. Anil Arora. I'll introduce all the panelists and we'll go one by one on the talks and presentations. Mr. Anil Arora, he's a out and out a logistician all his life, all his career. He's a serial entrepreneur, a founder of logistics companies. He currently founded and runs a company, Etios, ITOS Logistics, a transformation partner for MSME, transportation, warehouse, and third-party logistics companies. He has earlier founded MJ Logistics in 1995, which had handled the logistics for big names like Tata Motors, ITC, DuPont. He has also been instrumental in developing investment strategies for creating warehousing assets in India and helping US pension fund to have real estate interest of up to $11.6 billion. Going from the service provider in the logistics industry, we have a amazing logistic practitioner, uh, Naveen Chandra. He's a practicing logistician with experience of over 2 decades in supply chain. He works for Microsoft in the field of global fulfillment and logistics. He has been involved in developing logistics solutions and supporting B2B platforms, direct to customer, and intra-company shipping and logistics. And last but not the least, and the most experienced logistician, what we have today in the panel is directly dialed in from Germany. Peter. Peter is from Korber Supply Chain, leading supply chain automation company from Germany. Primarily, if I put it right, it's a big intralogistics company. Peter comes with a huge experience of 3 decades in the field of automated material handling systems globally, and he is truly a veteran in automation in the logistics and intralogistics field. He has worked in different parts of the world, and he's also responsible for the Indian joint venture which Cobber has with Godrej. So welcome to all the panelists over here, and not taking much time and just listening and trying to figure it out. Um, I'll give it to the first speaker, but before that, I'll just request all the viewers that please keep posting your questions in the Q&A part of the WebEx. There is a Q&A part. Just put it your question, write it down, your name, your company name, your responsibility or designation, followed by your question. Don't wait till the end. Keep putting your questions in. I'll consolidate and ask them later. Now, with not much ado, I hand over to Tapaswi. Tapaswi, uh, you will be talking, I understand, in this COVID times. You are still at home. You
Yes.
have not yet gone back to office, and
So,
surely managing the logistics for Henkel in these tough times from home. And I believe Henkel, this adhesives, would have been part of essential services because everywhere adhesives would have been used, and you would have been up and running on the day zero. So what were your challenges and how you managed during COVID time? Your views, your thoughts.
absolutely. So this look over here, I thought I'll dedicate it to COVID because I should not remember that I have only cleaned utensils and swept home during COVID times. So I have this look so that I'll remember this also. Okay. So, more than challenges, first I want to, start with digitization because we all have met for digitization more than COVID. Everyone has given importance to COVID. So let's give some importance to digitization, which is our core topic. So I was on a panel in last month. So one person over there asked me, "What do you think about digitization? Should we go for it now?" I told him it's not now that you have to go for it. You should have been there. The digitization should have taken place in your company a decade ago, not now. Now is the wrong question, actually speaking. That's number one. Number two, he asked us, what is the ROI for digitization? I mean, how should we say we want to go for digitization? What is the ROI? I felt, what I told him is, see, when parents want to have son or daughter, they don't think about ROI. They just think they want to have kids. They don't think that, okay, I invest on a son, say, for example, 2 crores over 20 years, and what do I get from him? You may get, you may not get. That's fine. That's all irrelevant. You may that after 20 years he earns, gives you a good house, takes you abroad. All this can happen. But the thing is, do you anticipate that? No, absolutely not. Huh? So in the same way, how can you say that digitization will lead to ROI? It may or may not lead to. You should not define benefits for digitization, or else you will land in times like COVID and you won't have any options at all. So that's how you have to look at digitization. It's like a son or daughter, actually speaking. So yeah, it was tough when we started on 23rd. The lockdown was announced completely. On 25th, we approached the government to give us permission because all our customers like RB, I mean everyone, Unicharm, all these people were telling we are into manufacturing essential products, so we need supplies for that. So we approached the government and everything was fine. We got the permission for 10% of manpower to operate. But how do we operate? The challenges then 10 days ago and now also remain the same. We have moved far. I mean, we have come a long way. But the thing is, are we there for the digitalized world? Say, for example, then and now also, if a loader has to go into the truck and load the material, if there is a manual loading, you have cube loaders. Coca-Cola has implemented completely. Cube loaders, they have digitalized. Okay, but they have automated. But here, what happens is when this pallet goes in, who has to adjust the pallet? If it's a normal truck, if it's not a palletized truck, who has to adjust the drums? Two people, four loaders have to adjust the drums. So two people have to get together to adjust that. So how are you going to eradicate these contacts? That is where do we need digitalization or automation? That's number one. Number two is paper transactions. Say, for example, The driver comes in with a set of papers. What do you think is the worst form of corona carrying element? It is the currency note, nothing else. Currency notes, they are very dangerous. So that is where you can't wash them. You don't feel like washing them. You just take it, and at one point of time, you will touch them. So they'll have multiple contacts. That is how the papers are also. These truck drivers, when they come to your warehouses, they come to your factories, they carry their papers. And you have to look at those papers physically, you touch them. When the paper is kept on your board, on the table, at the security gate, well, it's touched. Then it comes to the factory. Then the logistics person who's there, the warehouse person, he verifies the papers. There also you have a contact. Then within the warehouse, you have papers wherein the invoice comes, the loading sheet comes. Well, now that's the reason what we are doing is we are going for next. Although we have a very small facility that is around 3,500 and 4,000 pallet positions, still we are going for ASRS. That is automation. That's because we don't want to have this contacts. So that is at a later point of time, maybe in 2 3 years. But these are the points where you will definitely have contacts. And then, okay, we have thought about all this, we have said everything right. What about the driver who goes to the customer? Should he carry paper or not? Has the Indian government still come ahead and told, no need of a paper, we have a device, you give us a plug-in USB, wherein when the driver has to carry the USB, we plug into our device, we get the invoice and the e-way bill. Okay, we verify the documents are there and we'll send him. Have we come to that stage? Or else still the truck driver has to carry the papers, go to the customer. Well, he will have a pad, but the pad is for the customer to give the acknowledgement. Should he carry the papers or not? So still these are the challenges. The physical paper transactions within the warehouses are to be digitalized. So how are we moving towards it within the warehouses, within the factories, on and en route? Yes. So the cha we had challenges in terms of transportation initially, but because the topic is most on digitization, I'm not going into the logistics.
Um, I think it was short and very crisp, and some of the points which you said were very interesting, like digitization. Is it a choice or a need? Is it, do you want it or you need it? So I believe you are right on there that it's no more a want; it should be a need, and that's where need and want once somebody figures it out, that want thing goes off and it becomes a need, then one realizes. And also one more point, very good, where many times people get confused between automation and digitalization, and the differentiation between having a ASRS or digitally handling the documents. That's the difference. I think it was a very valid points to. We'll pick these on in the later part of the discussion and the Q&As. And thanks for being very crisp and right on time. I really like when things are moving on time.
Thank you.
And thanks, Tapaswi, for your insight. Uh, we'll move now to Mr. Anil Arora, and it would be the perspective from the service provider side. And there will be slide deck. He'll be showing the slide deck and talking to you all for next 10 to 15 minutes. It'll be breaking the lockdown during this lockdown. All the things will be breaking the lockdown with digitization, a service provider's perspective. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Anil Arora.
Yeah, hi everyone. I think we are the last session of the day, so I mean we'll help you sleep well, so don't worry on that. Uh, Digitization, the Paswi said very rightly that for a large corporation, it doesn't have to think about ROI, it'll definitely pay off. From my experience of my investments into service providers and being a service provider myself earlier, and going out of my league to buy a WMS as back as 2010, and then trying to co-implement it with a customer who was on SAP and facing a lot of challenges. So I've been toying with digitization up and down, in whether I was running an enterprise or I've invested in a company. And this perspective I'm giving from a third-party logistic provider, or a co-maker, or a lower down tier two, tier three supplier to a big vendor, how he sees digitization and what are the challenges that he feels will come across. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So,
And other
just
than
a
the
quick.
speaker, others can put their mic on mute, please, as a
So, what has the service provider seen today that, what usually happens in decades has happened in weeks? Uh, there is at least a 3 month break in supply chains on any company. It'll last up to 6 months on companies which have longer lead times of raw materials coming in from all over the world. Same on the supply side or manufacturing side. Some products which were on the shelf, let's say pre-COVID, will come back after 6 months from March. So we'll see them back in August. Uh, there hasn't been a comparable event, at least in my memory. Uh, I started building warehouses in 93, then logistics and third-party logistics in 95. So it's been fairly a long time. The maximum break that we have seen at any point of time has been maybe a week, if you put it back to back together. And I'm not getting whether it's COVID or not. It's basically a lockdown. It's a break in the supply chain. Uh, BCP was the favorite word of all the multinationals we worked with, and we would have implementations, and we would have all the jazz around a business continuity plan. Nothing worked because nobody had thought of such a long break or such a black swan event. Uh, Also, most of the sales projections and most of the volume projections, more importantly for a service provider or a co-maker, driven by historical data, business analytics, which we know. I mean, a simple thing like one of the investments I have works with an FMCG company. Uh, they have just exploded in volume, but all the value driver SKUs, which were low in volume and high in revenue, have gone because the consumption has moved more towards staple. And I don't know tomorrow the principal will have that kind of money to pay to the service provider also, who's actually feeling great right now handling bigger volumes. But overall margin pressure will maybe come in the next quarter or the quarter after that. The last thing that as a service provider or co-maker we see: stock in trade, stock in manufacturing, stock in transit. I mean, we had reached a point where we were living on 3 day inventories. We were, uh, depths handling was at a very very good position. But now when things open up, some SKUs which have gone um, past the BD, or they're just not anymore required by the customer. What will happen to that? And that occupies our space, that occupies our bandwidth, and that has a bearing on the parent's balance sheet as well as the service provider's balance sheet. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So, what the service provider saw in last 3 months, quickly, just a quick recap. Uh, Fear, and fear of no. I mean, the WhatsApp University has given everybody a PhD in fear, no doubt. And friends, families, colleagues, everybody came up with theories like they had just graduated as an epidemiologist, and it just completely drove fear into our our, our life. Uh, Movement of people, mass migration backwards, and wherever we were able to hold on to people, I mean, there was, one typical case where the warehouse is adjoining a village, and the village panchayat ruled that people working in warehouse are entertaining trucks. It was, and it is an essentials operation, but they were not around to enter the village. So, the service provider had to pitch tents for the people to stay inside the warehouse and do the essential work. transporter, I mean, only the good ones or with the best practices could hold their drivers back. Otherwise, the fear just drove them back home. They left their vehicles in whichever transit points that were there. Of course, thankfully, unlike the US, there was no mass looting. There was no damage to goods in transit was minimal. Most of the people were, just most of the inventory was just held. It wasn't looted. Guidelines. Uh, I still remember the day the lockdown happened. One of the customers was very worried and called the CEO of that service provider and said, at least it will take 3 days for what has been decided by the center to trickle down to the state and to trickle down to the ground. So you could fret for those 3 days, you could bang your head with the wall, but whatever is decided to get it down to ground, it will take 3 days. It kept on getting better with time, but also cross guidelines, uh, again state specific guidelines, and these operations are like a warehousing operation is dependent on labor and transport. It's moving across the states all the time. Like today in Delhi, most of the material comes from other states in the NCR. So it created a kind of let's say barriers within barriers. And uh, the last thing was that if there was a positive staff found in the warehouse, then the warehouse will be shut for a certain period of time. Now that will mean a real catastrophe. So again, the service provider invested in all the defense mechanism, but yes, as Tapasvi said, the documents are coming from the city. The money is coming from the city. The drivers are hanging out near the warehouse. You can't really do anything about it. So this was the second. Uh, yes, essentials were kept up. Apart from the 2 3 day break, we saw essentials moving across the place. Uh, Thankfully, the very channel that we used to say, particularly in case of FMCG and essentials, the Kirana channel and the distributor channel, that was the saving grace in a lot of places. I mean, uh, of course, organized retail had its own share, e-retail had its own share in saving the day. But I think the backbone very well remained the Kirana shop and being supplied by a distributor who was backfilled by a warehouse or an RDC by an FMCG truck who used to come into the city to deliver essentials. But yes, everything was suboptimal. Well, all working towards surviving, and maybe some place we were incurring more costs, some place we were spending more time, but we were getting the job done. But in terms of economics, it was all suboptimal. Uh, Transit issues, I'll just skip. I've already covered that. The last thing, which was very critical, was uh, a lot of companies, parent companies, would expect documents to move still, and simple things like EPOD and all were not accepted by the parent company, so it was not accepted by the service provider, and still, case of billing and all, you had to put in documents and then send it across. So this is something which I feel almost all the service providers, even a labor service provider to a big company, felt during this lockdown. And one of the four items would have definitely touched him, or he would have had to face the challenge. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So now what's coming next? This is like we are in the middle of the lockdown. The challenges that I talked about are more or less all over. Now we will see a recovery of volumes at least. And what shape that recovery will be, nobody knows. I have attended a lot of webinars, but in the end, like I'm going to tell you, and all the panelists with me are going to tell you, that you have to take your own call and you have to see the business your way. There'll be 1 hour of dialogue, and then in the end, it'll come. Please take your own call. So whether it'll be a U shape or a V shape or a W shape, we don't know. Again, as a service provider, as a co-maker, how do you gear up for that? Uh, on the supply side, the major change that is coming is a supply chain network redesign. Before the COVID incident, we were married to the idea of large scale RDCs and consolidation and GST-led less number of warehouses, large square footage. I think one major thing that is going to be at least need some rethinking is that because uh, if it was a 3 month lockdown or a 2 month or a 1 month lockdown, I think it'll completely change the inventory holding patterns, and I feel sometimes very sorry for the Kanbans and the lean inventory and the 5S of the world. I seriously don't see a big future for them. It'll be a survivalist or a sustainability quotient that will rule all inventory holding norms, whether it's raw material, it's finished product, or whatever. Vendor recalibration and de novo contracting. Now, this is going to happen very soon. Your principals are going to come down to you and say, okay, so what's your contingency plan? So where do you buy, let's say you're a atta manufacturer, where do you buy your wheat from? Or who supplies you this or who supplies you that? What happens if this happens? So it's going to be a huge recalibration exercise coming down our way in the next 6 months. And our contracts are going to include penalties in case we are not able to supply. And the favorite clause of the day, which is force majeure, is going to be redefined and redefined and redefined and maybe rewritten itself. So I think this is what we are going to look at very soon. So we must be mentally prepared as to how to handle this. So can we move on to the next slide? So coming back to the topic, again, digitization uh, was, as Tapasvi said, it was supposed to be there, but some guys didn't produce in time, didn't have the child, may have to adopt a 3 4 year old child now, or do whatever. But you have to. I mean, you can't hide now. You have to run. So what will it bring to the table? It will bring in visibility of inventory. Now, all this I'm saying is from a service provider or a co-maker's perspective. All the big companies have WMS, TMS, procurement software, a plethora of things to run on. But an SME, and if I include a service provider also as an SME, has to look at, I mean, he doesn't have an IT department also to calibrate what he wants to buy. So, there are challenges on that side. But if you digitize, this is what you're looking at. You're looking at better inventory control, inventory visibility, people, in terms of your assets, where are they at what point of time? It's going to be, it's now, I mean, with small mobile applications also, it's easy to locate people where they are, what they're doing. The assets, smallest assets have all the technologies to be tracked and traced. Bigger ones have been there all the time. Customer SLA visibility is very important. Now, when you bill at the end of the month and after that 15 days, you get a cut in the bill as to, this SLA was not met or that was not met. If you have a digitized platform, or if you have a digitized ecosystem, you know very well that day only what money are you going to get from the customer, because it's every day you have a visibility on the customer's SLA. Yeah. Controls for, I mean, with digitization, I don't have to go into detail. You have error-free documentation, exception reporting, everything is documented. So you know which guy went wrong and you know how to check it, or if you're losing some revenue, you will be able to point exactly why and where and who's responsible for losing that revenue. Profitability, yes. Ideal capacity utilization. You do not know in a large warehouse setup or in a large manufacturing setup how many people or how many assets are lying idle at one point of time. This will put it right there in front of you. Unit economics, a very important thing. How many, let's say, forklifts do you need? Is that unit giving you the return that you invested it for. Only if you have a WMS and you have an asset track on the WMS will you be able to see. And the last and most important thing is, uh, okay, so I don't, I'll be, I'll never wish that an event like COVID happens again, but black swan events are not an unreal possibility. You look at US, one black swan hasn't left and the other one has already arrived, right? So uh, it is a possibility. But next time that happens, and if you are digitized by that time, in the process of a day, exactly you need to react, what do you need to look at, what do you need at second. Today, at least for the first 15 days, you scrounging to gather that information and do the analysis as to what will happen or how you will react to it. And of course, the larger the fleet, the larger the setup, the more the number of locations, more challenges. But digitization at least helps you get the whole picture in one shot. Can we move on, please? So if you digitize, what is the real impact on ground as a service provider, as a smaller company, you will see that manpower productivity will jump tremendously. Repetitive mundane tasks automatically. I mean, simple things like making an invoice, entering an address, making a GR on an e-platform. The moment you type the name of the distributor, the GR will take an entry. So all that things will, cut up on time, uh, free the bandwidth of the guy. If he's a good guy, you can use him at, maybe real value added work instead of the mundane work that he kept on writing registers all day. And rationalization is an automatic process. Once you set in digitization, push out the task, automatically you will feel that whatever the people can be, moved to better work or better output, they can absolutely do that. Uh, I'm sorry to use the word, but more transparency, less autocracy. This is what I've seen in warehouses and in smaller manufacturing setups. There is one particular guy, and he knows everything. Where what is report, who does what. Just speak to Sharma ji, and everything will be done. No more. It will bring it out on the table. If you're firing somebody, you're firing him. Uh, if you want to give incentives to your staff, just link it with their productivity, which is very transparent through digitization, and you see the difference. Last and most important is the customer looks at you very, very differently if you're managing your house well, if your house is clean. Anytime he'll have a new job, he'll try and put it to somewhere where he has a little more confidence. Also, one thing I've seen in last few years is most of the operating managers on the customer side are fresh MBAs, and they heavily rely on data and data analytics. And the service provider is not really equipped with data analytics to counter his questions. So he has to take whatever comes his way and come by. Uh, Once you have digitization, you have data with you. You can actually, because your DNA is to drive value, you'll be able to drive value for yourself and your customer much more easily than anybody else. Uh, a quick turnaround of proposals and RFQs. I think I'm hitting on the right note here, because today a RFQ document looks like rocket science. It's to fill it up. I mean, all due credit to all the customers there. They try and count the hairs on your eyebrow through through a RFQ. So you will be able to do that better, because if you have data, if you have your own capabilities listed, your people, your type of people you have, so all that you can show much better. Can we move on, please? So again, agreeing completely with the Tapaswi ji, ROI, to my mind, is actually in most cases less than a year if you implement it well. Because again, with due regards to all the big software service providers here, India is the software hub. There are many softwares available. You just have to be astute enough to get the right one at the right price. And uh, there is a very good possibility that you'll land up with a good product. The only challenge is the one-time cost and the one-time effort, and which is like uh, driven down from the top. You have to drive it as owner of the enterprise, owner of an SME, and you have to make the change in your organization by changing yourself. It will happen. Uh, and that's what the next point is about, that this is a watershed event. If you say, if you read the book, The World is Flat, the world is really flat today. There is no barrier between a bigger company, a smaller company. Everybody is facing the same problem. It's just how well we react to it. And digitization will at least make us, let's say, die a better death, if not, live longer. So I think today is day one, and we should just stop thinking about not digitizing. We should just think about, how to digitize. I think I'm on the last slide. No, one more slide. Yeah. Can we just move on? So uh, the the lollipop is over. Now the stick part. It's not only goodies that are coming your way. Once you decide to digitize, there are questions which have to be answered. There are going to be bandwidth issues which have to be overcome. You can also, there is a risk that you get into what we call a paralysis of analysis, because digitization will start throwing so much of data. How do you know which one to absorb and act on and which one to ignore? Uh, you digitize completely and everything, and then the principal comes back and says, thank you very much, but this is where it ends. Now you converted all that to document and send it to me. That is also a real risk in this scenario. So you have to take into account as to what softwares are running everywhere else, what's the integratability of your solution, or how you will do it. And the end of the day, this is the last and the biggest question in any entrepreneur's mind. Who will I hold accountable? The software guy will sell me the software and he will move on. My IT department, it doesn't exist. I have asked the finance guy to look at it. If I pressurize him too much, he'll quit and go. What will I do? Now, these are challenges you have to think through before you start the digitization process. But I think we all here on this panel agree, those who have not started thinking about the prospects, they're late. As the lawyers say, I rest my case now, and I think my time is also up.
Thanks for your talk. I think it was nicely said that Lenin's word that what did not happen in decades happened in weeks. The true black swan event. I think there are many points which you mentioned, and we'll pick on that in the discussion later part. I once again request the viewers, those who are there, who are going through or watching this particular webinar conference, please put your questions. I saw one question coming. Please put as many questions as you can. We would answer those. Uh, Now, coming to our next speaker, I'm really looking forward to Naveen from Microsoft. He'll be talking on this COVID presenting a opportunity. It's an opportunity for fulfillment and logistics, and maybe what are the technologies currently, what could be in the future. So over to you, Naveen, and enlighten us today.
Thanks, Nitin, and thanks to Tapasvi and Anil ji for setting up a good stage. I think quite a lot of discussions happened on the COVID, and I'm going to slightly shift away and try to take away that interest, because the COVID has been almost 24 hours a day. It's on the news channels, it's on the conference calls, it's on personal talks, and including my kids. So I'm going to stay away for a while. But again, just to setting up a stage is also talking about how the automations work. Just like Anilji said, that hey, there are a lot of problems. How do we adapt to this during this period? So giving you a number means a COVID-19 test, which would have been taken 2 to 3 months to an year to develop, but just because of AI and machine learning, it was developed in 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, so that is one of the contexts. Some of the digitization, as an example, it could have been like uh, in South Korea was 22,000 retailers bringing that inventory into a single app for face mask was an amazing feat, which wouldn't have happened in a general situation because it's everybody is a competitor. So that's a beauty part of it. So as you said in your statement, right? It's day one is today. It's like that. Okay, the BC base. So let's move to the next slide. So this again, this slide is just to set my stage, actually moving away from COVID and talking about a little bit of automations. So obviously we have a lot of current challenges and there are a lot of future solutions, n number of them. And when we talk about automation, the first thing which comes into our mind is robots and machines replacing humans in an organization. That's the first thing that comes into anybody's mind. But in today's context, automation can be as easy as AI, ML, RPA, digital assistants, and layers of analytics, right? So this is something which you can adopt. Obviously, robots and automations are in very more advanced and more high investments, but I'm just talking about some things which are available, easy to deploy potentially, and all those stuff. So that can be done. Automation solves a lot of mundane work process, as the Anil J was saying that hey, sometimes the people might go away. There are a lot of paperwork issues, the process issues, and we might lose people and lose process and lose business. So automation solves mundane work processes, problems, and allows people to take up more challenging and rewarding activities, which means an employee satisfaction or a motivation to continue and do something new. That's way we look at as an labor and a people part of it. The next part I'm talking about complexities. Just take an example of data. Means obviously humongous data is going to come to us. It doesn't matter we are talking about it now or in the past 100 years. We had millions of data sets anyways, right? As a human, we can read, analyze, or solve up to a certain thousands of data, or maybe a few hundred thousand. But again, we still need a lot of tools to slice and dice and see what we want to see it, right? But machines or the AI stuff, it will allow system to continuously learn a lot from the data and from millions and millions of data points to give you something which you could make decisions on. Or potentially you can teach them making decisions by it could mimic human beings based on the past decisions what you have made and respond to the circumstances. So that is the potential of this in terms of technologies, right? Quality goes on the similar lines. I won't go deep on that, but sustainability is something which is close to many of the organizations. Obviously, sustainability comes with a lot of cost inherent into that also. But sustainability is a big topic right now, and it has to be supported by all levels in a corporation, in a big organization, small organizations. It can be as easy as packaging. It can be as investment of solars, or it could be as complicated going into a blockchain model. Blockchain is obviously a huge topic which is coming up in terms of sustainability and track and trace from a farm to table kind of a model, right? So let's move on to the next slide, please. So here we are talking about now. So this one actually, I just want to put all what I have seen through in the past few years. Obviously, there are many other dashboards talking about the same thing. What is short term, what is long term, and everything. But I thought I'll just put it as simple as whatever comes into my mind, but not looking at somewhere and trying to document it. So this is there can be more to the added to this list, but this is which comes out of my mind, right? So supply chains of the future will be most responsive, able to feel, pursue, and react to situations, considering the technologies what's getting developed in this supply chain space. So that's a big point. Okay. Now these changes could be driven by the customer aspirations. Take examples of 2-hour deliveries, track every milestone, personalization, reach to every geography possible. Actually, now some of these technologies will pick up that and be relating to some of those aspirations which I mentioned. I love every one of this. And if I had to pick few and say that, hey, IoT is something which is big. Obviously, IoT generates a lot of data. Automated guided vehicles is another thing. Obviously, huge investments though. But you have seen it. I'm sure you will have seen it in India too. Is gray oranges and all that. So automated guided vehicles, you will see a lot. Collaborative robots for sure. Basically, it will be between human and the machine how to do the same job together. Again, I would say some of these technologies have been there for like since 1950s, but now it has become, I would say it is more reachable, accessible, economical to go and deploy it actually, right? And again, the industry has changed over the past 100 years. So drones, again, all these things will work along with machine learning and AI models to deliver an intelligent supply chain or a last mile experiences in this world, right? So every step in the process of supply chain generates a lot of data, so which, as I mentioned, and let's move to the next slide a bit. So this is basically, as we mentioned, data is a new currency, right? So I just wanted to think through that when we are collecting so much of data, how do we go into this journey? For me, the first one is the trusted, meaning you have n number of data coming from n number of your touch points or partners or milestones, anything. Now, bringing all this together, it needs to be 100% perfect so that whatever reporting, whatever data you feed to an AI or an ML model or yourself, it has to be consistent. Any bad data would give you wrong decisions, actually. So this is the first part of it. Second, it has to be intelligent, which means we can no longer look at the data and say that, hey, what is the lower, what is the higher, what is the bigger issues, what is the small issue? It needs to be saying that it should be popping it out itself, meaning the dashboard needs to be getting more cleaner. Obviously, it has to be cloud-based so that everybody in the world uses it. To give an example, what dashboard, what KPI I see on my computer here, it will be seen all the way back in Redmond or in Europe somewhere. They will see the same pages at the same time, same data set. I cannot be manipulating it because there is huge number of data feed happening automatically. So then it's real time. Obviously, we talked about historic data, plugging it in, trying to make a sense out of it. That's for sure. Intelligent it has to be, but now it has to go real time. Meaning, example, look at point of sale. Point of sale data, how much time it takes for us to get that into our demand, then use that demand data to basically do our forecasting and back your manufacturing or sourcing your components and everything. So more the real-time data, more you can use it. But again, it needs to be processed. It needs to be processed intelligently around it. So humanly, it's not possible. You can go up to 10,000, 50,000 lines, but beyond that, it's going to be more complicated. Some of the companies on this call would be obviously more complicated than I can think of. Now, then it has to be collaborative. Data stream needs to be collaborative across internal and external partners. It cannot be only internal for us, right? Means obviously sometimes we shy away from sharing what we can share, and same thing goes for the partners or any of our partners. So, but it has to be super collaborative, which means that they need to be giving you real-time data where it needs. It could be customers, it could be service providers. Okay. That was on the data context. If you move to the next slide, please. Now, yeah, I just wanted to give you some examples around it. Actually, not going to deep dive. And again, it is this can be a little bit of an talking about a COVID here. So connecting different data points into a single cloud data warehouse and then into a BI tool for an end-to-end visibility is a key. The left-hand box talks about that. This is bringing our manufacturing, our shipping data, our last mile transportation data, and then our DC information, everything into one slide, one page. It talks about performance, it talks about volume movements, it talks about lanes and everything. This could have been only possible because the data is connected from all the different sources into one. Okay. Then going into the next box, which talks about predictive. Now, predictive means obviously you need to know where, when, how it is coming to your manufacturing plant so that the manufacturing is ready for it. You can plan your resources, you can plan your scheduling accordingly. So it needs to be predictive. Now, that example of a weather report, the weather report is integrated to your whole movement data from your supplier, it can tell you that, hey, potentially the shipment is going to get delayed because there is a storm in the high seas, right? It's going to be delayed by 2 days. That could be something else which talks about the truck movement, and that is a huge traffic setup in summer on the streets. It's going to delay your shipments by another 10 hours or maybe 2 days. Now, from a predictive, it moves into and basically a cognitive model where it says that because in the past you made decision, hey, because it's a 2 days delay, can I do an air freight for this? If so those kind of programming means it can be done on the AI or on the ML model. So it becomes more cognitive after that, make it more intelligent. Okay. So as an example, point of sale. I love point of sale data is because that data becomes more rich for us in terms of demand planning and then making decisions. How do you plan? So that's another example. Moving to next slide, please. Okay, so here I'm going to just give you a few examples on the automations part. This one is on the warehouse side, autonomous mobile robots. These are really small scale, moving pallets between your receiving area to a staging area to a put away area in the warehouse. Now it can be also used in the same outbound where it could basically deliver a whole shelf to your picking area, or between stations, between A to B stations. It could do that. It's not it's a very economical product, but again, the system integration is a key part. Like Anil was talking about the warehouse management. You can buy something from a small price to a big price. Similarly, integration is the key of this to your warehouse management. If you run this on its own, it won't deliver the productivity or the ROI what you need. There are many brands around it, so this is just one example of that. Okay. If you move to the next slide, please. One of the previous one is basically follow me model, right? So in today's world, your picker, when he's going, he's pushing the trolley, means depending upon the small lanes, he's pushing the trolley, he or she is pushing the trolley to pick and put the product and then move the trolley all the way to the packing stage. The follow me model is basically where you pick and put it into the trolley and it can go automatically to the packing stage while you get another trolley automated to your same lane, so that the picker doesn't need to go back to the packing station. You save a lot of time, improve the productivity, as well as you help the picker to be more productive on its own. Okay, that's another example of the AMRs. This one, I just picked it specifically to mainly around the Asia topic or maybe India specific. Though we don't see much use case yet, I have put some pros and cons of it. But think about it. In India, you have rice sacks, which is 25, 30 kgs, 50 kgs. The guy who's loading the truck, unloading the truck, means not the bigger companies I'm talking about, but there are small and the MSMEs where labor. Obviously, the labor is economical. But if you want to improve his health, and if you want him to deliver for a longer time in his work life, would this be one of the thoughts? Obviously, this is not a very mature technology yet, but it's coming, right? So I'm just saying that as an example. I picked up this just on a very personal note that I was thinking about the labor on those grounds in the SMEs and the MSMEs, or even on a smaller scale businesses. So it could be one of those technologies in the warehousing, in the loading and unloading areas, including maybe coolies, right? I mean, in the train stations where the coolies are picking up 25, 30 kgs of bag every other day. So if you have to improve his lifespan, would this be one of those? Means obviously it's the most expensive product, but I'm just giving it a thought, food for thought. Moving to the next one. Yeah, so automated guided vehicles. So this one is my favorite, I would say. And I guess we will be doing some pilots this year, by end of this year in our company. So this forklift can be used. It's autonomous completely. So you basically think about it as you have unloaded the trucks and you have put that into your staging area. You program it and say that, hey, this is where you put it away, and you go back home, shut it down, and you go back home. So it basically goes and puts into the storage locations has been defined. So obviously it needs to be tested out very well, high investments. It needs to work with your WMS integrated very well. So again, it is totally automated. It knows what to do, route optimization, because it knows exactly where to go from actually. So this one will be in super technology. Now, there are many brands around it. So we'll be deploying one of these end of this year. Okay. Next is my last slide, I guess. Key decision factors to adopt automation, adopt and adapt. Actually, I think I should put both. There are a few things. One is enabling humans to be more productive. That's a key factor. Safety is the second most biggest factor in automations. And error proofing for high quality. Obviously, automation means error proofing. I think even in the previous presentations, we heard that how error proofing is the key. Complex computing, meaning humongous size of data are coming in. Obviously, if you use AI and ML models or any other technology stuff, it should be able to deliver results the way you want to see, a slice, dice, and everything else, or potentially it could make your decisions on your own, some of the basics. So scalability is the key. Every business basically is trying to grow and obviously deliver better to their consumers, customers. So scalability is the key. And the most out of it is the ROI. And including us, including me, I need to basically, for every automation, every development, I need to make sure that the ROI is the piece which I need to present to the case without anything. So I just wanted to give thoughts around it and leave it there. So that was my last slide, and we'll take more Q&As. Nitin, over to you.
Thanks, Navin. I think, as I said initially before handing over to you, that enlighten us. I believe you enlightened everybody in the audience, and some of the takeaways were really good. Even digitization, you presented a case that it can help sustainability cause of a company. And one very important part which you put, that in the new digital world, in the older world of industrial revolution, the raw material and currency was in the capital worlds, and raw material was iron and steel. And in the new digital world, the currency is data, and harvesting the data and analyzing and using it to your benefit. I think that's the key. And those who will have the data will be the people who will run the industry, not the one who will have the real capital in the true term what we have today. So I think it was great. Now we are with our. We'll pick up on these questions after our last speaker, and we'll talk on these. And some questions are coming, and I still again request audience to please put your questions, but do put your name and your company name as well, so that it's easy to identify from where the question is coming. Our last and not the least, the speaker with the maximum experience in the warehouse automation industry, in the intralogistics, in the material handling system. Peter, we look forward to you giving us the flavor of the automation. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you. Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me in this conference in India. Normally I'm there 4 to 5 times a year, but last time I was there was January, and now we know we have a very difficult situation. Here in Europe, we are now slowly getting out of lockdown, although I'm still working from home the coming 2 weeks probably. But I also realize that in India, especially in Mumbai, it's still more difficult. So our office in Mumbai is also still closed, and our factory has been opened again, but it's not always easy to get our staff to the factory outside of Mumbai. So today I would like to focus on some trends in general in supply chain and supply chain automation, and then specifically some trends that are, let's say, now accelerating due to the COVID crisis. Let's start us in general. So if you go to the next. We have the next slide. Yeah, oh, that was a bit too fast. We skipped one. I just mentioned before on the previous slide that the supply chain is getting more and more a strategic topic, and also getting more, let's say, mission critical. And of course, that we have noticed already, let's say, in the past few months, how critical that was. And on top of that, we get a lot more complexity in. So a lot of challenges that the supply chain managers and us working in logistics get thrown at us. And you see a couple of these challenges here on the screen popping up. You have more products, you have more suppliers, you have to fulfill through more channels. Customers have more expectations for choice and speed, price, and at the same time, it's difficult to find the right people and to train them and also to keep them. So it's not easy to keep up with all of this. And then we got COVID on top. So we get some extra, let's say, challenges and trends that we see or that we expect after the COVID crisis. So perhaps we go to the next slide.
Riaz, can you give the control to Peter so that the animation can work on the slides? Peter, if you click on the participants on the top and you can reclaim the host position.
Let's have a look.
Top
Participant.
left,
I can
participant.
I get it in already. Yeah, I take control. Yeah, it's good. Thanks. So let's go through some of these post-COVID global trends that I at least start noticing sitting here in Europe. And not all these trends are confirmed because I think we are all somehow looking into a crystal ball, but I think we have started noticing some of them. First one I think is a sort of a no-brainer. Let's have a look. Yeah. So what we have seen during COVID now across the world that there's more buying from home. So online sales goes up, and of course the e-com sector profits from that. That is during the COVID crisis, but the clear expectation is that a lot of people have gone over a hurdle. So the e-com sector will continue, let's say, to grow faster now after this crisis and as a result of this crisis. So that's the first one. Second one, that's specifically, I would say, for the COVID crisis, and it was already mentioned before, there's a fear now for the vulnerability of the global supply chains. So often we don't even know what is in our end product and where it exactly comes from. And we have noticed that certain components were actually coming from areas where we didn't expect it to come from, and all of a sudden they were not coming anymore. The consequence of that is that at least already in the US, they're talking more and more on onshoring, but also in Europe, we have started to see that. And actually it was also mentioned already for the Indian case as well. So that will have an impact on manufacturing and also on the pharma producing. Another area is that people were staying at home and they are looking, let's say, to eat at home and also look for safe food. What we have seen already in the past few years that there was a big trend on, let's say, on frozen food across the world. Actually, we see that as well in the request we get for automation of warehouses. And we expect this to grow even further. We saw this already during the COVID crisis with all these 3PLs that run these deep freezers to hire more staff, but also they are currently investing more and more in automation, also during the COVID crisis. Then another one is, I think we see, I mean, you see that with all the applauding in different countries for, let's say, our nursing staff and the people working in the hospitals, but there will be a new appreciation somehow for healthcare. So I expect, and we all expect, that there will be an additional investment in that sector, which also, let's say, has an effect on the hospitals themselves, healthcare directly, but also we think on the pharma industry. And then we have also now something like a fear of the vulnerability of human labor. So we have noticed that we are really dependent on them in certain areas, and and specifically also in logistics and in manufacturing. And one example is clear in Europe and in North America. We have seen that specifically in, for example, in meat production, we have huge number of cases of COVID. And that means that all these productions somehow get stopped. And at some stage in the US, there were even burger chains without burgers. So you can see the vulnerability we have seen of the human labor, and that will cause a general drive to automation as well, which will, let's say, affect all the segments. And perhaps the last one is, as a result of COVID now, there will also be an uncertainty in the market. So we will have people do not really know what the economy and their volumes will look like directly after COVID. That also will, let's say, cause a fear of doing big capital investments. So I expect that there will be, let's say, a result of that, of people looking to more flexible solutions. sometimes perhaps also looking at 3PL or 4PL solution instead of doing the capital investments as a customer themselves. So perhaps in conclusion, now to see whether it, yep. Some consequences then for, let's say, supply chain automation. So looking for us, looking at the market, we will see that certain markets will accelerate now. So e-com, I already mentioned, cold chain, pharma as well. So we will see more investments specifically in those areas. But also in general, we will see an increased interest in automation. So to reduce the human dependency so that the business can continue afterwards. As mentioned, we will see a request for more OPEX type solution instead of big capital investments. And I will also see, and we'll come back to all 4 of them, an increased focus on digitization and AI, mainly, let's say, to get more predictability of the business going forward. So taking them then one by one. First, 2 examples in growth industries. So e-com, you don't have to read all these small letters there, but we see, of course, new technologies. I come back to that popping up, but we also see a strong trend to new supply chain models. So the example here is for e-com grocery, where let's say the traditional automated facilities for e-com grocery were huge distribution centers. I don't know whether you've heard of, for example, for Ocado, which is in the United Kingdom, they have huge distribution centers, fully automated, outside the city, and then truck everything into the city, and then go with smaller buses to the different addresses. We will see a clear trend in move to micro fulfillment center. So you just have to Google it and you will find plenty of the results. So much smaller facilities inside the cities, often now also more and more automated because they're looking to that. So you will see a drive for new types of technologies. And at the same time, we will see also a drive for new supply chain models. So it will be much harder to control all these small centers and to make sure that all of them keep the right stock levels and availability. And at the same time that we don't overstock them because the space is somehow limited in these micro fulfillment centers. So that's one trend in e-com. Also in cold chain, we see another trend. Cold chain traditionally were big deep freeze warehouses run by 3PLs handling full pallets. What we see now is that the groceries and the retailers are smaller quantities. And in these cold chains or in the deep freeze facilities, they are now also, let's say, requested to do much more order picking. So the examples here you see is a layer picking, so doing layers instead of full pallets, but also more and more individual case picking, and then somehow consolidating that back onto pallets again, which go to the retailer. So a much more drive for order picking than just full pallet handling, which we saw before. We go to the next level. So I said there is a general interest in more automation, but then, okay, what automation to pick? There is a lot of different ones. They depend a bit on, of course, on the volumes, so order lines or cases per hour. Also depending on the number of articles you have in the distribution center or in a warehouse. And then you see some examples of equipment like stacker cranes and shuttles and auto store and sortation equipment, pick to belt systems, etc. All of these driven by, okay, what is the investment? What's the labor cost saving? What's the energy? What's the building cost, etc. And then they find their place on the map. But we see also new things coming up. So we see new technology coming in, and they have to find their place on the map as well. So you'll see now robotic picking in the middle. You see a lot of autonomous mobile robots, which we also heard in the previous presentation. We see sortation robots instead of, let's say, bigger sorter systems. So a lot of different technology, and they are somehow trying to find their place on the map yet. For certain technologies, we are not even sure yet where they exactly will sit in the future. But then there is the question, like I already said before, on the capital investment, there are always 2 questions there. Is the automation flexible enough? So can it grow or adapt to the business needs I have? And it requires potentially large investments. So there things are a bit changing again. So we have seen also in India, also from our company in India, a lot of warehouses being built with, let's say, with stacker cranes. either for boxes or crates or for pallets. And that you build up a racking, you build up stacker cranes, basically you have a one-off larger investment. And if you want to extend, you do another larger investment. So it's with bigger, let's say, increments that you have. And that's perfect, actually, if you have a manufacturing side where the production is pretty stable as well. So then the volumes are pretty stable. But if you go to distribution side, sometimes you need more flexibility. So we'll see some changes there. So here, was already mentioned before, we have AGV systems, which we try to show through the video. I don't know whether that works over the line here. We have shuttle systems. We have all kind of mobile robots coming up. And the thing is, you see that here with the AGV as well. So we have a storage facility. The storage is not directly coupled to the equipment because you can have a big space and only one or two of these AGVs. And if you need more capacity, you add just one vehicle more, or in the below pictures, one mobile robot or one shuttle more. So you can do more gradual investments. And then you see that in the graph, you basically add more or less your capacity to what the volume you need in your business. Another change is that yes, here we have normally when we do in automation, we somehow need to cope for the peaks. So yes, we have an automated warehouse, so we need to know in December it's the highest month. So we need to have enough investment to deal and enough equipment to deal with that peak season. And you see that a bit on the graph on the right-hand side, even though in most of the year you will not need the full capacity. Also there you see changes, and that is mainly changes due to a collaboration between machinery and humans. I'll see whether I can get that. Yep. So you see on the, well, that was one too fast. And yeah. So you see on the in the middle, you see here on the top, you see pickers, let's say doing picking with, in this case, with voice picking. So in a warehouse management system, in the example from us, from Kerber, driven then with, let's say, voice picking application. But here in the bottom, I don't know, the video doesn't, can perhaps start it again. There you see an autonomous mobile robot. Same environment, it just picks, in this case, it picks boxes. It goes through the facility. That is installed for the base load. So the robots does most of the work, but at the moment that we have a peak load, then we add people, let's say for 1 or 2 months a year, and they work collaboratively. So we have robotic picking, but at the same time, when we have a peak load, then at the same time, the humans can pick up again and add only for those peak loads. So we only do the big investment for the base load. So there's another, let's say, change that we see in the automation field to cope with more flexibility. The last thing I mentioned is digitization and AI. I gave you just 2 examples that we are working on as well. So here you see just an example of 3 sites that have what they call layer picking robots. So mostly used in FMCG or in groceries, where you pick different layers from different products and combine them. The thing is that these facilities normally have a huge different number of SKUs and articles, and they behave differently while picking. And that means you somehow have to tune the system to the correct way for all these different products. And what we try to attempt here is have this system learn itself. So keep the data of the behavior in the cloud, and then let's say slowly the system is tuning itself, and not only itself, but actually it also helps to tune the other sides. So other sides that have the same products, let's say, get the learnings from the first side, and they can therefore teach each other. So that's one thing to let's say have less downtime, more predictability, and also more predictability of throughput and availability. So one clear example of digitization and AI. Another one, so a practical example. Also this case is an automated warehouse with also order picking left and right from it. But what you see, of course, is not a real system, but it's the digital twin of the system, which means we can use this whole model not just for testing the whole environment before, let's say, we actually install it. So we are sure that the stuff is working when we put it to place. This is a system that's installed in the US. But it's also then handed over to the customer so that the customer can then use the same model in the future to predict certain things. So what happens if I run out of these products, or what happens if I get all of a sudden a big peak on a Friday afternoon? How will the system behave? And with that, he can then, update his operation to make sure that he can handle these eventualities. So just 4 main examples I see as trends post-COVID. Come probably to the conclusion slide. So 4 topics what I wanted to bring across. So after COVID, I expect we see an extra boom now. It was already growing fast, but in e-com and also cold chain, potentially also pharma manufacturing, depending on where the onshoring takes place. We see a trend in more automation, also in other technologies, to reduce the human dependency. We will see more, that we see that already with autonomous mobile robots, more technologies that make it possible to do a gradual investment and OPEX solutions, and then the digitization and AI to create a more resilient supply chain. And with that, I would like to conclude. So you see actually the companies that are part of the Körber Group, we are all moving to one brand. So we are slowly getting people to get used to it. And as said, in India, we have a joint venture with Godrej. So that the joint venture handles the whole business in India. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter, for letting us through the global trends in supply chain. I think you picked it pretty good that the e-com would be the one which will pick up or will get more traction after the COVID. And we already see signs like Italy in Europe had one of the lowest e-com penetration. And during the COVID times, the penetration in Italy for e-commerce went very high. And the kind of investment some of the e-commerce players are now doing in Italy are very encouraging for the distribution, warehousing and distribution people. I think another point you put it very right that it will be a balance between OPEX and CAPEX, and also collaborative system. Do we design for peak or for the base load or somewhere in between? And if you have designed the system for base, then how you can make a collaborative system? I think pretty good points over there, and we have finished that. And there are some questions which are coming, though we started a little late, and a couple of presentations we had gone a little bit over the time, but it was very interesting in the virtual world, in the digital world. We could sit anywhere in the world and we could do our conference, the Digital Logistics Summit of CII, which was a feature every year in the middle of the year, which we were doing in India the last many years. And this year we could do it digitally, where you could participate from Germany, Peter, and Naveen could participate from Singapore. And within India, people were participating from different parts of the country. And it's amazing. In this new virtual world, digitalization is already happening. And we are already generating quite a lot of data, and it is already in there. Who participated, when he joined, when he moved out, what question he asked. So I think before I open the floor to the questions, and I pick the questions from 4 or 5 questions which I have already got. Now, I would just again go back in a little bit to Anil, that there is a fear and a fear of the COVID, which had driven many things like mass migration and some of the processes which we are doing. Will it be, you spoke about Black Swan event also. Will now people start designing their distribution networks? You said about redesigning the networks. Will they start designing considering these kind of Black Swan events, or business would be as usual with little tweaking, with a little factor of Black Swans in it? What's your take on it, Anil?
So I'll give you the diplomatic answer first. It will depend on industry to industry how they react. But the truth is that every industry had got married to the idea of, we'll uh, going forward operate from, if they were operating from 25 places to, we'll go down to 15, we'll go down to 10, and ultimately one fine day we'll be at 5 places and doing everything. Now that purely from a continuity standpoint will get questioned at a lot of boards. Uh, Now, how that gets answered will you know will depend, and only time can heal that answer. Time can heal the wound that is being caused, and answer and answer that. I'll take you back to a long time, an event called the Y2K event, right? So,
Yeah.
so imagine, I mean, for maybe 5 years, the boards were just discussing the Y2K event, right, and preparing for it, and nothing happened. Right? Now, this is the reverse. Nobody ever discussed that, in fact, one of my friends in the government had said that, this is being considered, and I was told of that in somewhere about early March to shut down the country. And I only dismissed it and I said, are you mad? We are 130 crore people. How can you shut us down? And how can this happen? And how can that happen? It happened, right? So I'm very sure for next 5 years, it's going to be at the board. And there is going to be one naysayer at the board who'll say, okay, let's hold on. Let's hold on for another year before we consolidate. Or there is going to be the business which is going to tell that you need inventory at a little more places than you thought you would, because uh, particularly the lean methodologies, and I feel very sad in saying this. Some of the companies that I've worked for as a CNF agent in my early days and now had put in years and years and had got down to really, really lean supply chains. Now, in an event like this, those were the ones who got hit the first. So there is going to be a thought at boards. I know it's going to increase inventory carrying cost, it's going to increase cost of doing business and all that. If there is business, there is cost of business.
I think very nicely
Nitin,
put.
I'm sorry, I would like to add to what Anil told on the same point, how it's going to be in future. See, the thing is, if you see, we have moved from a time where people used to have warehouses, that is godowns, not even warehouses. From there, we have gone to distribution centers, okay, because the service providers got the confirmation and the assurance that, okay, the companies are going to come into this, they're going to hire this space because safety is of prime importance. So they have started building these warehouses. This is distribution centers where we are occupying commonly. The companies are taking one distribution center and multiple companies are occupying. That's fine. But tell me, why are these service providers? Because I've taken up with this one of my service providers 6 months ago, not now, 6 months ago. I told him, boss, you have 90% of stake of our business. The warehouse are with you. Why don't you go and invest in ASRS? So build a mega facility with ASRS. Okay, we'll move. Our warehouse will definitely move. All these three warehouses will move towards your warehouse where you have ASRS. And plus, seeing that people will come to you. You don't expect that you get people and build a warehouse. So if the service providers, are serious about this and think digital and way forward, then it's going to be easy for everyone, because as a company, if you're planning to go for ASRS, again, the question of ROI comes in. You have to put up your proposals. It'll go to different layers. It'll go to India, it'll go to Dubai, it'll go to Germany. So that's the way it is. But for a service provider, you know how the market is, what the anticipation is. Now is the time for you to act and automate so that you can get the companies and the business.
I think I
I
grapple
think
with
I,
this.
I'll
I,
push back on that, Tapasvi. You're just passing the parcel on the poor service provider who, anyways, doesn't get any money. So you're
it's
shortcutting your way to the board to prove the ROI. And I know some of the international service providers have all the money, but domestics are going to find it challenging, and even you will find it challenging, because the way a service provider looks at ROI is very different from where a corporate looks at. So
Exactly.
I have my doubts on that.
I exactly resonate with both of you in a different manner because I deal with the both the service providers and all, and I think it's India has still some time to go at a very high automation level,
Nitin,
which
one more point. Having said that, I would like to pick on Peter's brain. Uh, is there an opportunity for a financial play here in terms of, a financier getting into to bridge this, putting up the money, and then, he makes an arbitrage which is a little more than a regular financing because he's doing a riskier investment.
I mean, we can always discuss these kind of topics. Ultimately, what is needed, probably also on the service provider side. So I take all three in. Because ultimately service provider will only invest if he also has some longer term commitment. So I would so go back to the customer, and in this case to the previous speaker, and say, hey, give me a 10-year contract and I can do much more on automation than if you give me 1 or 2 years. And in these kind of cases, we then of course can look at different financing models as well, and that depends a bit on the, let's say, on the stability of the operation and the stability of the, let's say, investment that we have are doing together. So if you have something that has to fluctuate every second year, we have to look to other types of technology than if you have a fixed installment and a fixed ASRS system, for example, for 10 years. So happy to
Yeah.
discuss that on individual cases.
And again, as Peter said that, right, it's a long-term contract. So logistics managers would say that I would love to have a long-term contract, but the sourcing manager in your company would say that no, I need to do it every 3 years. We did a survey actually a couple of years back saying that long-term versus short-term. The report was only 30% of the logistics managers in the room said that, hey, I need a long-term one, and 70% was short-term. So investment versus contract. So it's very hard call.
Yeah, but of course,
I think
if you ask someone whether it's long term or short term, everybody wants to have the flexibility of short term. If you at the same time ask, hey, do you want to have a lower cost or a higher cost, you go for the lower cost. So these things sometimes go hand in hand.
we'll not solve the thing over here. The thing to Anil is that yes, there are operating lease available for service providers in India by the technology suppliers. It can be done, but the case has to be there, as Peter was mentioning, and as Naveen was mentioning. There has to be some case. And I have personally tried for last 10 years operating lease for the material handling system in India. It doesn't work because when you put the whole case together, the cost of capital is coming in play, and then the service provider or the manufacturing company will say, my cost of capital is less than you. And so I think it's a bigger pie where somebody has to solve the problem. I'll take one question from the audience which has come, and I'll pitch it to Tapaswi. Tapaswi, there is, you spoke about going digital, and it's the time for digital. And it needs an infrastructure, not one single company, single individual is trying to put the whole logistics digital. It won't be possible. The whole infrastructure around has to be there. And one of the question, it's not purely on the digital thing. There is a question from one Mr. Pramod Verma, Manager Procurement, Pernod Ricard. He said, how to standardize road freight on all routes in India, because the mismatch is there. And I think here the AI or something, the matching the freight with the truck, if that can be done digital, have you come across something like that, or how do you manage this? This would possibly answer the question of Pramod, though it's not very much related to digitization, but I have tried to aim it towards digitization. Tapaswi, to you.
It's more related to logistics. And thanks that you diverted the question to me. I was waiting for this. Okay. So here again, my friend Anil would say that you are passing the buck, but yes, this is the need of the hour, the suggestion. Okay, here I had this, idea a few months ago again, the same thing. See, each and every company pays what Pramod from Pano Record is coming, what is coming from where is that we are paying different freights. There are different service providers and we don't know a standard of freight. That is what I get. He's not talking about automation, but he says, what's the standard? We are paying different freights in different routes. So this is where I think CI as an organization, you know, has to collate the freights and they have to publish a freight charter, a warehouse, rental charter. That should be the standard. Okay, oh, CI is saying it. Well, that means that becomes the norm. At least based on that norm, people can, go plus or minus 10%, 5%, whatever it is, according to the business. But if it comes from CI and say, okay, in these lanes for a 7 tonner, for a 10 tonner, for a 15 tonner, this is the standard, then I think that'll solve the problem.
I think this is being taken up by CIA already to Secretary at the Ministry of Commerce, and things are being discussed. But I think who has to do the thing, it is being pushed here and there. But I think it's quite taken. I think we are a little short of time, so I'll have to quickly run through the questions which are already there. I myself had plenty of questions for everyone, but I think we are short of time, so we'll have to, in the interest of time, we don't want to spoil your weekend, and so that you can have a Friday evenings pretty nice. So I'll take the next question, which is from Krishnamurti KR, Head Distribution, Bharat Biotech. Um, and it can be answered by Anil and Tapaswi again. What is the current status of digitization in Indian logistics industry? And second question, what he has is, what measures are taken in logistics to detect and avoid transmission of COVID from cargo to cargo handling to personal and vice versa? I think the second question we can park it, and might not be very relevant for the digitization. But the first question, what is the current state of digitalization? A quick one single sentence from you, Tapasvi, and one single sentence from Anil.
Yeah, in logistics digitization, we have a long way to go. As I told you, we need documentless transactions if you have to do in logistics, right from the RC book, the pollution, the driving license, and your invoice and the e-way bill. Everything has to be on a platform. So we have a long way to go. For now, companies have come forward. They have gone to 70% of it. All the transactions in warehouses are automated. SAP has done most of it, but SAP is not a complete solution. If we need to have external softwares to support SAP to get what we want. SAP can't give you everything. So digitalization in terms of these softwares will help you to go to 90%, but the 10% still remains that you still need documents at the customer end. Most of the customers are asking for digital invoice. Yes, that is solved. But the road transportation, the police, RTO, if that gets solved, then I think we can completely digitize from A to Z.
So I can't answer it in one sentence, but I'll try to keep it short. Uh, on the I think the question is very valid because again, the customer has all the wherewithals to SAP downwards or SAP parallel, everything available. But service providers, let's say, have not really moved beyond their standard homegrown ERP, which is Tally. On the logistics side, there are the large fleet owners, the mid-sized fleet owners. I think everybody is using track and trace. The next logical step is okay. I'll make the sales pitch here. Is what we are trying to build. We're trying to build a small platform, an integrated platform, which solves all the technology needs of a small service provider, and he doesn't have to go all the hoops. But the challenge really remains not the investment, but how to manage it. So on the service provider side, I will say only the large service providers have digitized maybe 50 to 60%. But the smaller, there is a huge market or a huge opportunity there to see what all can be digitized and what are the benefits that can be realized.
Thanks. There's a few questions which are similar in nature, so I'll club it and put it together. So there is a question, there's no name on it. So there is from Prabhu P from Adna Export, Chandan S from SC, one of the SCM operations enthusiast, and then there is from Colonel Avindranath Soni, Indian Army. and it is related to manpower migration and the job market, how automation and digitalization is going to affect. So, Naveen, you spoke about sustainability and quite a lot of digitization and automation bringing AI. You spoke about cobots also, and Peter also did spoke about co-working spaces. So, how do you see the job market is going to affect? And Edna has specifically asked, how does it affect on the corporate social responsibility implication of global digital? So it's mainly related to these questions are related to job market, people losing job, which I understand from the questions. And what's the answer for that? I have my views, but today I'm not going to give my views, and I'm going to pick on your brains, Naveen. So over to you.
So, obviously, automation is, means obviously we can talk about means job losses as the question posed, but it's not that. So, automation, AI, or machine learning is to make your job more efficient and scale the business further. That's one part of it. So if you start segmenting different set of people, so obviously there is like one scale where their productivity goes up. The second scale is about saying that we need to enhance the next level of people to be trained into basic digitalizations. I'm not saying that they need to learn AI, ML coding or something, but they need to move the level up, saying that how do I use a drone? How do I use a robot? How do I use a machine? How do I do something different? So I think it's about getting the next level of people who has never used any part of this to next level of automations for them and make their life better. So it could be an including a security officer sitting out there who has been walking around the whole building for you or the factory around you. He can be basically sitting as a control tower and managing like 25 cameras, which is talking about the cameras are telling him, hey, what is the hot spot right now to look at, rather than looking at the 25 cameras or walking around. So that is the possibility. That's if I may answer that way.
I think perfectly said, and I fully subscribe to that. That automation does not take job; it rather improves the mankind, the skill set of the mankind. It takes the mankind to the next level. I'll take one question, which is this would be the last question because we are running out of time. And to audience, which the other people who have questions which are not answered, we will try to send the replies through CII in written form to you at the later part. But for the time, I'll take this as a last question for Naveen and Peter both. This is from CII School of Logistics, that while digitization and automation is well understood, these systems are also vulnerable to cyber risk, data security. So it's all about data security. And we spoke about, Naveen, you spoke about that the new currency of the world in the digital world has to be data. And when data is the currency, there will be hackings, there will be, and you did spoke about data collaboration also in your presentation, Naveen, that you spoke that the way forward is to collaborate on the data level. How do you see the data security, cyber security, when everything is automated, digitized? And this question is both to Peter as well as Naveen. So whoever wants to take first and then give the second one can give his view, and then we'll wind up the day.
Let's hear from Peter actually. Peter?
I think it's actually probably it's more for the Microsoft side than on my side. I mean, it's clear that we collect more and more data across different sites in different platforms at the same time as well. So we are all actually looking more, because that's not actually what we within Kerber are doing. We would look then to, let's say, the Amazons and the Microsoft of this world to, let's say, because most of the stuff we are doing at the moment is in the cloud and not on premise anymore. And where a lot of people are afraid of moving it into the cloud and think they're still better off with a computer sitting in their factory floor, we surely believe that the cloud is the future, and we work, let's say, with partners like Microsoft and Amazon with that cloud activity. So I think it's a nice transition.
Peter, how do you manage the China part of the cloud when Amazon cloud is not allowed?
Actually, our business in China is still pretty limited, but even in Europe, we have discussions on the cloud because not all European customers like an American cloud either. So we always have to be somehow dealing with that as well and say, hey, we can also have, let's say, a dedicated cloud, let's say, still with the big providers, but let's say hosted it in a data center in Europe.
I mean, your views?
Yeah, so again, cloud is the way to go, that's for sure. Cloud, the reason behind that is, means I'm not selling any product out here, but cloud in the reason, the way it looks like, one, it's an integrated infrastructure, actually. So you don't need to invest separately into antivirus, firewalls, and n number of things. So it's all integrated. So that's one part of it. I go back all the way to 20 years back. I'm sure people who have been using Tally, I think Anil mentioned about it. So Tally used to be with the dongle, and dongle came as a secure device as such. But dongle got copied rapidly that you can use the same Tally license for like a number of machines. So I think those days. Then came the advanced versions of those things, and it still got hacked. I think the what I'm trying to say is human is very superiorly intelligent actually, right? So they will always find hacks, they will always find and ways to get in. But I think even the corporates who are providing the solutions, they are not they are providing more secure solutions. They are basically hungry to make sure that it's secured in. So my view goes now down the line, which is talks about quantum computing. Now that will be a complete different game, and 5G will be a different game. When that comes, the speed of hacking might be completely different. Right? So I'm just leaving it as a thought, but what I'm saying today is it's cloud environment, which is much more secure than you can ever think.
Great, thanks. There are plenty of other questions. I have many questions which I wanted to ask, but I think time does not permit us. And I would like to thank everyone. Peter, there were nice points you had spoken about going hyper local with respect to micro fulfillment centers, bringing flexibility in OPEX and CAPEX, and designing the warehouses, distribution centers for the base load, maybe not for the peak load, which we are used to, e-com going to pick up. Similarly, Naveen, it was great talking to you, your views on uh, data currency, AGVs, cobots. AGVs have been in the industry for years altogether, but they were not finding the space. And I believe right now is the time where AGVs are finding their space in the automation. And one interesting point, Naveen, which you gave about sustainability, digitalization also helps you in your sustainability cause. And I think the digitalization has to do, as you, Naveen, said, it has to be responsive. From the push system, I believe it has to go to pull system. And going to so thanks, Naveen and Peter and Anil, again, many thanks for your views. Being a veteran in Indian logistics industry, your views were really spot on with respect to what the COVID is going to cause in the short term and medium term and immediate terms, like uh, what didn't happen in decades happened in a week, and the aging inventory, some of the inventory might not be used. And Tapaswi, your points, like it was really, I think, would be beneficial for many of the audience where people are on the fence whether to do digitization or not to do digitization, or trying to find out when to do digitization. I think you hit there spot on that it's not the when, it is now. You just do it now. And it is not a want anymore, it is the need of the hour that we need to digitize the whole ecosystem of the logistics, whether it is a freight, whether it is a warehouse, whether it is a distribution centers, whether it's intra logistics, overall logistics. So I think with that single point, that digitization is no more a want, it is a need. And if you are not doing it now, you might be out of the game in next few years. The speed is phenomenal, and it will be difficult to catch up later. So you better jump now or be out of the game. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, audience. Thank you for your evening, Friday evening. I wish you a great weekend and a great Friday evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nitin sir. Thank you all the panelists who have been very grateful, and they have taken down their time for this wonderful interaction session. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.